Hi everyone, how are you? Today I'm super excited because we have probably one of the biggest YouTubers that I follow and that talks about the things that love like, super a lot. I don't have words to explain it. And
Things we're both nerds about, yeah.
and actually this is one of the times that I'm the most like nervous because of what you mean to me. But
Oh,
so I'm because I'm gonna have a hard time describing you. Could you please introduce yourself?
I always feel bad when I introduce myself because I'm like, oh man, how best do I do it? I mean, the way I usually describe myself is I'm someone who rambles on the internet about things that I love. But to be a professional, basically, I will say I'm a YouTuber who talks about pop culture, and talks about pop culture through like political lenses. So I'm a queer person, trans person. So quite often I talk about it from a queer and trans lens, but I'll also talk about different things through political theory and things like that. I'm a huge Trekkie, so a lot of it's Star Trek and using Star Trek, but I'll touch on anything from like Star Wars to Adrian Tchaikovsky to horror stuff, all of these different things. And then at the same time too, I am a writer and also a filmmaker, and I've made a couple of short films and working on hopefully getting a feature made at some point in the next few years. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's the short version of who I am. But at the end of the day, I'm just a weird nerd who likes to talk about weird nerdy stuff. So
Well, we have that in common, and I know that you've watched at least one of my interviews with Edin
yeah,
Tchaikovsky,
it
and
was really good. Which, by the way, which makes me feel weird. Where you're like, oh, you're the most nervous to talk to me. I'm like, you've talked to like some really cool people, and I'm just a YouTuber. So I'm like, wow, that.
well, I understand what you're saying, but is this thing? I'm a huge fan of Adrian Tchaikovsky. I'm a huge
Mhm,
fan of Martha Wells,
mhm.
but I followed your work, and I think the internet has this thing that makes you feel closer to the people you're watching because I
Yeah.
follow like when your fiance, stuff like that, your relationships, what's happening in your life, everything, like we get to know a bit of it. So when I made the decision to start doing this, like you were a big part of it. So even though I'm a huge fan of those people, I actually I feel like you really changed my life. So that makes me a bit nervous.
No, I totally get it. It's first off, thank you for saying that. That makes me feel really really honored to hear that. Like truly, thank you. Um and yeah, but I get it too in that weird way of like I've had opportunity in my career to like meet some of my heroes. Like I've worked with like sorry to name drop, but like I've worked with like John Delancey who played Q in Star Trek. He was in one of my movies, and that was like this big thing. But he was also like already throughout my whole life like a big. He was in Star Trek. He was this big guy. So like when I met him and worked with him, it was like it still kind of fit that mold of like, oh my God, there's this big person in my life that now is like a big person in the thing that I'm working on. Whereas like I've also the opportunity to meet other YouTubers who are now like my friends and like we're in the same co-working circles. But when I was coming up, it was this weird thing of like, oh, I know about you. Like I know your whole life. You've never met me. and and now we're like just chilling and chatting like normal people would, which is weird. So like I get it. It's like there's this weird thing of like, yeah, you probably know me better than you like my day-to-day life a little bit better than you would like Adrian
Yes,
Tchaikovsky,
yes,
which
exactly.
like he may have made these like monumental works of science fiction, but he's also like a big figure. Whereas like I get it, you kind of get a piece of my life,
Yes,
slice of my life a lot more. So yeah.
exactly. So that kind of messes with my feelings a lot. Like, oh, I'm talking to you, so that's kind
Yeah,
of tough.
yeah, yeah.
So you know that I do this. I probably because I did it with Edin Tchaikovsky, and I do it in all my interviews. And I like to start telling people that here you can curse as much as you want. There's no
Yes, fuck
restriction.
yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah. So to make everyone feel comfortable, we would like to know what's your most used curse word.
Oh, most used? I mean, fuck is probably the easy one, just because like it's like an easy modifier. It's just used in everything. It's like it's fucking great to like talk about fuck and like it can be used as a noun, used as a verb. It's an emphasizer. But like I've been having fun because I started hanging out with more British people lately. So I feel like I've started using the word cunty a lot more. It's a very fun word. And like in America, I don't know if it's the same in Brazil, but in America, cunt is like a very, like, it's a really big curse word. Like, it's like, you do not say that. But then like British people be like, yeah, I was dressing really cunty today. Like, just as like an offhand. And I'm like, it's like so jarring to me. And I'm like, I love it. It's like so casual for British people. And here it's like, oh my God, you said cunt. So I don't know. I feel like my most used is fuck, but like cunty is probably it's closest to my heart.
You can use both of them during this interview.
Good. I'm glad.
Well, so now that we opened the gates, I wanted to talk to you about a bunch of stuff. And actually, I had to shorten a bunch of the stuff that I was preparing because you're the type of person that I would like to hear your opinion about pretty much everything. But I made it shorter, so I don't.
You're
take a lot
making
of
me
your
feel you're like building up my ego today. I really needed this. It's great. I had a therapy session earlier today, so I was like, oh God, I'm a terrible person. Everything I do is awful. And now you're like, you're great. I'm like, cool. This is great. This helps. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm being honest about it, but well, talking about your YouTube channel because that was my contact to you, and I always look forward for to see your videos because usually it takes me like 2 to 3 days to watch them all, but it's my company while I'm doing a bunch of stuff, so I really enjoy them, and I really admire what you do with your videos because you have this talent, technique, I don't know what it is, experience to
hyperfixation and
maybe, yes, but something that you do that is pretty amazing is that you can tackle a bunch of like very heavy themes with some like you're good at it because it doesn't get heavy, but you're serious about it, you're not taking them lightly, and you navigate between them and pop culture with such a way that I find it hard not to, well, I don't know, like engage with your content. And while I was doing this research, I thought it was amazing because I went to your very first videos.
Oh wow!
So I saw your gameplays and I saw your podcast. I saw a bunch of stuff, and I was like, well, well. First of all, it's very encouraging to see your progress, to see that you didn't start like the way that you are today. You started with crappy equipment as well, and you started building up. So first of all, I wanted to know from you, how was the process of understanding yourself as a creator and to getting to the point where you are now? And if there was a moment where you kind of felt like, damn, I'm doing something very good now.
To answer the last part of that first, no, never. like legitimately, even to this day, like I still have crises of faith of like, is this good? Am I just making crap? Like, you know, I'm working on a script right now that actually, ironically enough, just as an artistic exercise, I'm referencing some of my old gameplay videos as part of the writing of it. So it's just ironic that you bring it up. But you know, I'm writing it and I just sit there in this like anxiety of writing, and you're like, is this making any sense? Is this good? Is this crap? And then it's I feel like part of being an artist and growing as an artist is like understanding that that's part of the process and just knowing how to like punch through. Because I feel like what stops so many people from doing art is that they start making something or want to make something. Everyone has this novel that they want to write in their brain, but then when they either sit down to do it or even think about starting to do it, they're just like, well, it's going to be crap. It's going to be terrible. And I'm like, the thing that everyone needs to understand is that your first draft of something, your first way through, is always going to be terrible. Always, every single time. Like there are some people that will make amazing, like there's like some people that will do like amazing work in their first try, but most people, like even the best writers ever, will make terrible work on their first go through. And certainly with time, your first drafts will get better and better as you like hone as an artist and you understand yourself more. But like, it's just understanding that, but it's when you're doing that, you constantly get in your own way of like, oh, what am I even trying to say? Is this making any sense? Is this awful? And you just have to go through it. And the mantra that I always try to tell myself, and it's easier said than done. I still struggle with this to this day. I was even struggling with it yesterday. Which is, don't get it right, get it written. Which is a phrase that I love. It's like, just get it written out, like get it on the page. Because once you have something on the page, you can always make it better but you can't make nothing better. You can't like multiply by zero. You know what I mean? So that's always the thing that I still struggle with, and I feel like that's part of the process of becoming a good artist. And like to go back through like that's kind of what my process was of like finding my voice. You know, to give like a truncated version of my history, you know, I went to film school. Like I was inspired by science fiction, Star Trek, you know, a bunch of TV shows growing up, and I was like, I want to make that because I felt seen in science fiction in a way that I didn't, for being a queer creator, being a trans creator. But when I finally graduated from film school, I was lucky enough, you know, not immediately after college, but a few years after college, I got a job at this LGBTQ magazine called The Advocate. And I worked there for several years, and it was very nice because it like helped me articulate my views on being trans and understanding politics and queer theory in a way that I hadn't really done before that point. But it also made me realize like, oh, I love talking about this stuff, but I'm also more of a nerd. And that's what I really, really love. And so much of my like finding my voice at that point was like, all right, I'm going to go to YouTube and just make videos, just create, just make things every week. Like every week I'll try to make one video that will like express something that I'm really interested in. And through that, finding what I wanted to say. And I feel like so much of like beginning artists is kind of finding what you're fixated upon, of like what ideas, because I think it's kind of subconscious for a lot of us, of like what ideas are we weirdly fixated upon in our brain? Like what are we stuck on? Like for me, I found like some of the things that I get stuck on are talking about community and talking about like how do we build connections and community and solidarity across lines of difference, and coming to understand difference and understanding that like human experience is multiplicative. There's no one way to be human, and yet we all kind of relate to each other through our experiences that are different. And that's an idea that I just get stuck on, and like it constantly comes up, and everything I write comes back to that idea over and over and over again. And then like as a writer, like I talk about doubles and juxtaposition. Like, you know, when I write creative fiction, I'm always caught on like duplicates and doubles, which kind of dovetails with the same theme of like people being the same but having different experiences. So like, anyways, long and short is that like when you write and figure yourself out as artists, you just find what you're fixated upon to a degree. And then I feel like as you grow, you start like finding new ways to explore that idea and explore the things that you're stuck upon, and explore the ideas that your brain keeps tumbling around. And so I think that that's how I've grown as an artist, is just like, you know, realize to be an artist, you just got to punch through feeling like you don't know shit. And in fact, I often feel like people who do feel like they're the most confident about their art are usually the ones not as good as they think they are at it. But then like trying to hone in on what speaks to you and what you're interested in, and really sort of delving into it and trying to branch out from there and explore ideas that sort of come back to those things that you want to explore.
Your videos, you pretty much, I don't know if that's the right phrasing, but you're a critic. I'm gonna say you're a critic.
No, that's a perfectly good phrasing. Yeah.
But I'm like unsure about using it, because I feel that you do like so much more that the analysis, but you're a critic as well. And while I was doing my research, I saw a podcast where you participated, where you said that as a philosophy, you tend not to say that art is bad or it sucks, and that you question if it's effective. And as someone that, other than interviews on Instagram and sometimes on YouTube, I do reviews of books, science fiction books, comic books, stuff like that. And I thought that was interesting. And once you said it, I know I kind of came back to your videos, and I was like, yeah, she doesn't really do, she doesn't say that it's crap or it sucks. Like you tend to make like a very nuanced analysis. But I wanted to understand more about that philosophy itself, not only because I want to learn, but because I thought that it was that word nuance is something that tends not to be like, people don't usually do nuance, and that's something that you do, and I thought I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was even thinking about this literally yesterday too, with this video I'm writing, because I'm doing this whole video, but it's analyzing like how, without getting too deep in the weeds on it, because I could talk about it for hours, as I will in a video, but it's about like talking about how a lot of our fiction focuses on like children are our future, and so it'll be like deferring our hopes for the future onto the next generation. And there's a lot of queer theory in that. And so I was talking about the movie, without spoiling it too much, One Battle After Another, which kind of has that same theme. And I'm criticizing in my video the movie One Battle After Another, and I'm like stopping during the middle of writing that bit, and I'm like, I have to put in a line somewhere here where I say it's still a really good movie. I really like the movie. It's really good. Like, I'm critiquing this part of it, but me saying this thing I have a lot of thoughts about in a way that's critical. Is not me saying movie bad. Like, there's a lot great about the movie. I'm just focusing on this part of it for this video, for this argument. Because I know with the internet, right, we have been so trained often on the internet to hear people say criticism of something, meaning they think it's bad or not worthwhile or something that is, you shouldn't watch. Like, if I critique One Battle After Another in this video, people will be like, well, Jessie hates that movie, I won't watch it or whatever. And I even saw, for example, another creator that I really love, FD Signifier, made a video about One Battle After Another where he criticized it as well. But I don't even think he was saying something like, you shouldn't go watch it. But it was saying, like, here's my problems with how it, like, his take on it was like, here's how it portrays, like, it kind of erases a little bit of the history of Black women in revolutionary action. And that was a very valid criticism of that movie. But he's not saying, like, the movie's terrible, but, like, this is an aspect of it that like, fails or doesn't fully, like, capture a lot of nuance about this topic, or like simplify something for like the sake of art or what it's trying to say or the perspective that it's coming from, because it's written by Paul Thomas Anderson, a white dude. And that's not saying anything bad. It's saying here's some things to talk about it with, right? And I think, again, going back to like why that's sometimes hard is that our culture is very, capitalist. It's very like everything needs to be, whether you are going to waste your time on it or not, because time is a resource we think about in our world of like, okay, am I going to waste time watching something or not? Am I going to use my time? Am I going to spend my time? And then also it comes back to money, right? Of like, is something worth spending money upon? Is it something worth giving up my labor, which is again related to time and all of that stuff. For it. And so a lot of our conversations around art becomes reviews, right? Which is it worth your time or is it not? Is it good or is it bad? And so it comes down to like this like axis of good, bad, because we want to sort of place things into product buckets of like, is it good to spend money on or good not to spend money on? Is it good to spend time on? Is it not to spend time on? It's a yes, no binary with something. Whereas art, to me, is all about like exploring ideas and understanding things and understanding perspectives of like, especially art made by like, a certain perspective, whether it be one auteur, quote unquote, or like, the people making it or whatever. There's many different ways you can analyze a piece of art through. But it is sort of like looking at like, how does this piece of art see the world and what does that say about what they're thinking about the world? And I love digging into art in that way of talking about all the little minutia. That's why I have 4-hour videos on something like Star Wars Andor, right? Where it's because it's like, I love this part about how it understands revolutionary politics, but then how it sometimes depicts queer people or how it thinks about children or like how it thinks about like what comes after revolution. These are things that I think are critical about it and like how we should think about like what we are fighting for in revolutionary politics, for example. And I think that that's very fascinating. And I think it's worth discussing because it reflects how people think about the world in a way that's more nuanced than like, well, this Star Wars Andor got this thing wrong, so it's bad. You know what I mean? It's like, no, there's so much more. And I feel like it without getting too philosophical, because this takes us on a much longer tangent, but it kind of speaks into how we view a lot of things about like, when people talk about cancel culture, it's like, oh, well, person's good, person's bad. And it's like, no, people are complicated and weird. And we can talk about harm and accountability and how people try to avoid it or not. But like, it's usually much more complicated than like person bad, person good. And I think that's something our culture tries to simplify in a lot of ways. And art is just a very obvious way that we do that. Welcome to my TED Talks.
I'm going to be honest with you. I have as much time as you have. So as long as you want to talk, I'm here.
It's why I became a YouTuber. It's why I'm sure you became a YouTuber as well. It's like we like to hear people talk and also talk ourselves. So
exactly. Actually, to be honest, my fiance, when she held me I was at a moment where I would finish a book and I would storm to her and talk to her about like, oh, this happened, this book is so amazing, blah, blah, blah. And she was like so bored. She was like, oh, okay, that's fun, sounds super fun. Make a YouTube channel, talk to the camera. It's better if you do that. So that's how it happens.
No, I know the exact thing. I do the exact thing with my wife. I'll be like, hey, I just read this huge book on queer theory. Do you want to hear about it? And she'll be like, sure, for like, 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, so it's happy when I find someone that likes to talk as much as I do about the stuff that I enjoy. So
yes,
I'm not gonna
I am
complain.
right there with you.
So like I was saying, you talk about very heavy stuff in your videos, and I would like to point out that I think that you're very sensitive about it and you're very respectful, and that's pretty amazing because I think that we should tackle these issues, and so it's good that you do it the way that you do. But I had something in my mind all the time because it's not rare, in my opinion at least, during your videos that, well, I feel that you're getting emotional because many of the subjects that you tackle are very related to your own existence. And I got a quote from a video of yours where your video is from gender identity to sci-fi movie director, what I learned. And it's a very touching video. I really loved it. And you said, and I quote, "It's hard to be eloquent about the stuff that depresses me." And that kind of hit me because as someone that, while I'm going through the process of learning YouTube and talking to people, I do wish that I could be more open. I'm a bit self-conscious about it. I like, people know that I have a health condition, but I don't really like. It's not that I like it, but I feel insecure about talking about my stuff. And I wanted to know for you, from your experience, how was your process to, I don't know, speaking to a camera about such intimate stuff? And I think it should have happened to you, but I am not sure. Have you sometimes maybe like stop recording to cry a bit, to like get away from the subject and maybe get back tomorrow? Because some of your videos, like, it's I think they're important again and very sensitive, but very heavy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have there have been times even where it's not even been like I've stopped the recording, where I've literally like broken down on camera and then like just I have footage. I'm like, well, I guess I'll just cut that, break down from the video. But it's happened before. It's been an interesting journey with vulnerability on camera. I think that's it's such a fascinating thing because I've been even thinking, again, you're touching on things that I've been rethinking. I'm at a weird place in my career where I feel like I'm like at a touchstone of like thinking about how I want to grow into my next step of my career in a lot of ways. And so I've been like more consciously thinking about it. But, I started off in a lot of ways wanting to express this, like that's the reason I got into film, is like I have a lot of these feelings that I wanted to express, like, especially going to film school as like a closeted queer person. Like I wasn't out at the time that I went into film. It's like there was definitely something that I felt like art allowed me to feel that I wasn't able to express in other ways. And so that's why I kind of went into film and into art, is to express these feelings that I had inside. And then coming out as trans was this interesting experience because it's this thing that was like probably the biggest secret of my life at that point, of like, I didn't want anybody to know, to now it's probably the first thing that people will know about me. Even just visually, they'll be like, oh, that's a trans person I'm looking at. Like this big secret is now, that like I hid for so long, is now the first thing that people know. And that's such a weird experience because it's just like, okay, I guess I have nothing really to hide. Like there's no point in not being vulnerable and not sharing these things. And especially like, again, going into like, I went into, talking about queer politics at the Advocate and stuff like that. So it's like, I was better able to like express and articulate what I was going through as a queer person, like just philosophically or politically, all of these things. And so I figured I wanted to tie that into my work. And especially with YouTube, again, I went into film, and film is very much more a place where you're writing from the heart. And like, yes, you're making arguments and stuff, but you're writing from an emotional place. Whereas YouTube and journalism, which is what The Advocate was, is it's not emotional, but you are kind of speaking information. It's like, here's a bunch of information. It's like, when I read queer, I have this book on him, like you have queer theory, and it's like, it's very dry. It's a very dry subject. And I think what helps people understand stuff better is like, instead of like going through billions of sources and using really big words and stuff, is like trying to get people to understand it emotionally. So when you write in a video essay, it's trying to take these bigger ideas and themes and making it into an emotional topic and make people feel it in some way. And that's, I think, some of the best writing, even the best, like, political writing and philosophical writing makes you feel it. As much as I love Judith Butler, some of her early writing is very dry and like hard to get into. But then you read some of her newer stuff and like it's a little easier to read. Like it's not less thoughtful, but it's like a little easier because she's tying it into some emotional things that are going on right now. And that's how I think people progress as artists. But also, and so like that was like a big thing for me of like why I try to add emotion into videos. And what's interesting is not all the time, but a lot of the time it's not lying or performative, but it is calculated, right? Where it's like, okay, here's the part of the video where I'm going to get vulnerable and emotional. And usually, I'm never lying when I'm saying those things, like they're coming from a real place, but they're also like, I'm very well aware of like, this is the point where I'm going to say something vulnerable that I'm going to talk about. So like, even my recent video that I did about like Ezra Kine and liberalism and all of that stuff, there's a section in there where I talk about expressing my anger at like our discourse on voting and all of these things. And like in the video, I get heated. Like I have this like moment of like getting very angry. And that's a very real emotion that I felt, but it was also very calculated of like when I wrote this, I'm like, okay, this is where I'm going to express this anger. So there's like that acting involved in there, but it is coming from a very real place. Which, especially in video essays like that, when you're vulnerable, it can be very dangerous. Like it's when they talk about with actors, I went through Meisner acting training to like learn how to be a better film director. And the big thing they tell you with Meisner acting training is like never use real life, like use emotions, but use like fake experiences to get those emotions out. Because otherwise, sometimes you get something like method acting, which is like you feel all the emotions or like draw upon very real things, and it can be very traumatizing and can actually like be an impediment to what you're trying to do. With video essays, when you're talking about your emotional experiences, you're drawing from very literal places of what you're talking about, especially when you're putting that in a video essay and having to perform it. Like even not just writing it, you're performing it out. And so that can be very difficult. And I have, like, as you said, had breakdowns with it. And also we live in a time right now in our culture where like everything is atomized and taken apart. And it's been one of those things that's been one of the biggest difficulties of this job over the past like few years has been seeing how the internet takes things in bad faith or will misinterpret you or will hyper-analyze stuff. And I don't want to even say like, I want to always be open to criticism. Like there's times where I fucked up or made mistakes, and I always want to be open to like talking about those things. There'll also be things where people will take things out of like take moments where you're being vulnerable and put it out of context or remove it from context to like heavily criticize. And that can be very traumatizing. Especially I'm on the autism spectrum, and like for autistic people, we want desperately to be understood. And it's part of like, for me, I like to be understood. And that's why my videos tend to be so long, is like me trying to express myself very clearly of what I want to say. And the internet sometimes is not a very kind place for people who want to be understood. Let's just say, as many of us now know very acutely. And so it's been one of those things where I've gone back to like finding myself sometimes even struggling more to be vulnerable and like trying to be willing to still kind of continually open up, because our culture tries to teach us to try to close ourselves off. And as an artist, you can't do that. You have to try and find ways to be vulnerable. But there's always that push and pull of like, how much can you protect yourself? How much can you allow yourself to be sort of traumatized by the world? And then also, how do you open yourself up, continually work to open yourself up more? And it's a constant navigation, right? And it's something I've struggled with. As you say, I've had breakdowns on camera, off camera. I've had breakdowns from harassment. I've had breakdowns from people not understanding. but I've also had a lot of joy too. It's not all sadness. Like hearing you say like your work, my work meant a lot to you, like really does mean a lot. And that also influences how I feel about stuff. So yeah, it's a big ball of all of it.
Yeah, no, well, I'm in not a good place to judge because I don't know what exactly you go through with all this stuff, but I can tell you from my perspective of someone that has seen a bunch of your videos for a long time now. Well, those, I think there's a lot of people that do video essays and people that are very good at it that make them like, I enjoy watching them as well. But I think that you do stand out because you talk in a way that has a lot of feelings that go through the screen, at least to me, and that helped me a lot to make me feel like talking about or comic books, stuff like that. It means stuff because like I told you, I don't have a lot of geek friends like in real life. So I grew up in a situation where I didn't have a lot of people to talk about it with them.
Yeah.
So I tended really not to talk about it and do a lot of stuff. So I've kind of learned that it was like, just like my hobby, like something I would do to escape. And the internet showed me, and you were a big part of it, that no, it means. And it took me a long time because I started watching you when I was like, I don't know, 30, 31, like 4 or 5 years ago. Like 4 years ago, maybe. And it was like the thing that made me like realize that, damn, like I do feel that stuff. I didn't know that. I didn't have words to put it, but like I do. When she said it, like yes, that's it. When I saw that shit, I felt the same way that you're. So I don't know. It has a lot of impact on me, but I digress.
It's important because like I think we do, especially with pop culture stuff. Like we tend to view it as like, oh, it's a silly hobby or whatever, right? But it's like human beings, like I don't want to like overemphasize it, but we are beings of stories, right? We tell stories about ourselves. Like that's how we exist, right? We tell a narrative about ourselves in our head of like, we are this way. And that's like when traumas happen or when we have identity crises of like, oh, when the story doesn't match the reality. And like, and that's, so we're always built on stories. And so when we talk about pop culture, they influence both how we feel and how we view the world, right? And that's what I like to talk about, of like how these stories affect how we think about the world. And I'm very much someone who like, I argue for like, we should try to change things and try to make the world better and like agitate for like, fighting for a better world. In, there's numerous ways that can be thought of. And that's what I kind of get at in like stuff about Star Wars Andor or stuff like that. But like, at the end of the day, like these stories influence how we think about that, and the types of stories we tell influence how we think about the world. And I always feel like stories are never like pop culture and stories and movies and TV are never going to like be the change themselves. Like very rarely, sometimes, but very rarely is like a story or movie or work of art like the thing that like will spark a revolution or whatever, or like be this thing that like causes all this change. It's usually very rarely that. However, the stories that we tell will influence like what people are dreaming of and what they're reaching for and what they want to try to make next. And I think it's really important to try to understand and break that down and try to think about like how we think about the world and how we feel about it and what emotions influence us to create that type of world. So yeah, I don't know. It's just it's very important to talk about it, like these stories that we tell each other.
Two things. First of all, that's the perfect segue to what I'm about to ask you. And second of all, I do think that sometimes people underestimate the revolutionary value of emotions and feelings. It's good to have, it's amazing to have theory, to have practice, to do stuff, but the way that we feel about stuff, it's very important. I was radicalized during the pandemic because I was angry. I was fucking angry all the time, and I needed to do something about it. So I looked for left-wing organizations around the place that I live, and I started to contribute. But that was because I was angry. I already was left-wing, like
yeah. No,
But that's the thing that made me like, if I wasn't angry, I probably wouldn't done the stuff that I do. So
Yeah.
you were saying about stories, and that's something that I really wanted to ask you, and I'm so happy that you were talking about it, because in actually, when I was talking to Adrian Tchaikovsky, he said something about this as well. I am not very fond of the people associating science fiction with the prediction of the future, the science fiction authors and creators, they are predicting stuff, and that kind of like takes out the agency of the people, in my opinion, when we kind of put this type of narrative. And I really wanted to see your take, and you are actually kind of started talking about it, but I wanted to know what's, in your opinion, the role of narratives, and particularly of science fiction and pop culture narratives, in political and social struggles.
Well, I mean, we touched upon it, but like it's something that you were talking about there too, of people tending to argue that something like science fiction is it's describing the future, like it's descriptive rather than aspirational, right? And I was actually just to give let me make it more concrete instead of talking in like nebulous ways. I just finished a video. It's already out on Nebula to promote Nebula. But it's talking about why tech bros, tech oligarchs like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk love Star Trek, right? And when I was writing that video, what I found, because I was just trying to explain, like, why does Elon Musk saying, like, let's make Starfleet Academy real, while he's also doing like a fascist salute on stage at the presidential inauguration, right? Like, how is he able to connect those two things? And the way, if you look at how they talk about Star Trek, right? Those guys see Star Trek as this is 100% how the future is going to be. This is what, like, Star Trek is the future. It is inevitable, is how they think about it. And all we need to do is just continue down the path to make that inevitable future that I know is coming real. And so you like hear them talk about like, Sam Altman, who runs ChatGPT. He says stuff about like, oh, when I saw Star Trek and I saw AI, I knew it was definitely going to be the future. So I wanted to get in on it. And so these people are trying to exploit the future. They're trying to like be like, this is how the future is going to be. So I'm going to try to capitalize on it and exploit it and get like my name on it so I can have like a legacy and continue on. And also anyone who tries to push against that inevitable future is wrong and needs to be brought back in line. So that's how you get people like who end up being fascists about being like, oh, queer people, they're disrupting the natural way society should be of like 2.5 kids, a family, like this is the natural order of things. And so people who are disruptive to that status quo need to be brought back in line and get like stop the fall of civilization so we can reach that inevitable Star Trek future that's better. But they don't have any idea of how to like create an actual future that's more equitable for people. They just exploit the future because they see it as this inevitability that they need to just press into a status quo. Whereas you look at people who look at science fiction as aspirational or not even aspirational, because Star Trek is aspirational, I think is a good one. Like you look at like, I even make this comparison in the video of like, there'll be, there were scientists who were like created like technology that Star Trek had in it. Like the guy who created the cell phone. And you listen to how he talks about Star Trek. He's like, yeah, I saw the flip phone communicator that Kirk had. And it was something I was like, oh, I wanted to make that. I was inspired by it. And I wanted to like see how that would work. So like they view it as something to get inspired by or to aspire to, rather than something that's inevitable. And they want to strive to make it better. And for me, that's the role of fiction, right? It is something to try to articulate to us what we are reaching towards, what we are thinking about. And science fiction should never be seen as the inevitable end. It should be seen as what are we aspiring to, what are we growing to. It's why I love Star Trek in specific as an example of this, is why I keep coming back to it, because it is this aspirational thing, but it is aspirational in every single, within the time it was made. So like the Star Trek of the 60s, its view of aspiration was like, okay, let's have a black person on the bridge. Let's have an Asian man on the bridge. Let's have a Russian guy on the bridge. But it was very tokenistic. It was like they're there, but they're not really like moving the future. Or if we get to like more current day Star Treks, which have its own problems, but they'll have more like women and people of color as like part of the driving of the future, and like they get to take part in the narratives. And so it's like, okay, like this is how we think about the future and how we want to articulate the future and what we're reaching towards. But Star Trek should not be a definitive endpoint. It should be something that we're like trying to articulate what types of futures that we want and things like that. So to go back to your base question of like, what's the role of stories? For me, the role of stories are to try to articulate how we think about the world and how we view the world and how we want the world to come into being. And to get somewhat pretentious, and I'll end on this note, but it's something that I've been, I was talking about these ideas that we're focused on. One thing that I've found that I've become very hyper focused on is this idea of queer futurity, which is something a wonderful philosopher Jose Esteban Munoz came up with. Love him to death. He's probably one of my favorite philosophical writers. But he talks about queer futurity as like seeing queerness as a horizon. And what he means by queer is not like being gay, being trans, but he means being outside of the norm of society and feeling like you are like marginalized or pushed down, and that you do not fit in what the culture says you have to be, which is everyone to some degree or another. And understanding that like we dream of a better future. We dream of a future where we are not queer, where we are not marginalized, where we're not seen as outsider or different, but we are included as part of the project of humanity and society. And so we create stories to try to help us envision what that kind of future is like. And then we start creating that future, what he calls rehearsals, in our interactions between ourselves, in like how you and I talk to each other. And the way that we talk to each other is different than how we're supposed to talk to each other. Of like, men and women are supposed to be seen as like men control women. Like that's what, like, no, but we can create a culture where that's not the case. And we, in these small moments between how we treat each other, we create a new future. We rehearse that new future between us. And slowly we expand that out between how we build like queer communities, marginalized communities, and build something different until that becomes how we think of, that's how the world actually is. We make the future become real. And it kind of even ties into like queer theory and stuff like that about performativity and like, talking about Judith Butler and like talking about like how gender is a performance. And, I always relate it to me being trans of like, in my brain, I had this idea of this woman that I wanted to be, but she was a fiction. She was this future that was on the horizon that was like utopian. And I didn't know if I could I don't know if I could reach that. Like, I don't know if I could ever be her. But slowly I started to come out and transition. And now I have become her by the small performances every day of making the person that I dreamed of become real. And I made her real. I am her now. And that's how we can think about society. And that's what stories can do. They allow us to articulate how we want the world to be, or how we want the world not to be in some cases with a lot of fiction. But I think that that's kind of the role of stories for me, is just articulating how we see the world, how we understand the world, what we want the world to aspire to be, how we want the world to not to be, or to get people to understand how we see the world, because some people may not see the world that we do, and helping people understand it. So I think it's just really, that's the kind of role of stories in politics, is to help us understand what types of world we want to create. And that's why I always say like stories are not the spark for evolution. There usually will be something else. But what stories we tell, I think, influence what we're ultimately working for. When we do have those, we fight for changes. So
you talked about that philosopher. I forgot his name. What it was?
Jose Esteban Munoz.
Jose Esteban Munoz. And I've heard you talking about him in other your videos. And there was a quote that I got. And I don't know if it's yours. I think it's yours, but you were talking about him because I looked it on Google and it didn't associate with him. But you said in one of your videos, you were talking about him, and you said being queer is a futuristic state of being. And I loved it so much. I actually took the quote because I wanted to talk to you about it, but I couldn't fit it anywhere. But I'm so happy that you talked about him, because that quote is amazing. I really loved it. And
yeah, I think that specific quote might be mine, but it was certainly very much inspired by him, because he talks about queerness as a futurity. So I think it's if it wasn't an exact quote of him, it was definitely inspired by him.
Yeah,
so.
I Googled it and it didn't match it to him. And so I'm pretty sure it's yours, but you were talking.
It was definitely inspired by him.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, well, anyway, I love that quote. I think it's amazing. And well, we were talking about future and narratives and their power and their what they should do in situations. And one thing that I really wanted to hear you talk about is that, well, like we said a bunch of times, you tackle heavy stuff in your videos, and some of them, they're not very nice. And I feel that we live in a world that constantly bombs us with bad news and crappy shit.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know, how do you manage to reject pessimism? Because I feel that you're a very hopeful person when you're talking to. And I saw a couple of your interviews, and it kind of feels like you see the possibility of things going well, that we might learn and things get better in the future. And I gotta be honest with you, I agree with you, but I find it hard sometimes. I really do. I get the feeling that we're like one step closer to the apocalypse or stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I wanted to know how you handled with it, and how do you produce videos with such a hopeful view of pretty crappy situations.
I mean, to be frank, I struggle with it a lot. I really, really do. And kind of frankly, a lot of my videos that do have hope in it are me trying to convince myself, right? Like a lot of that writing is me being like, I like want to believe this. Because at the end of the day, like hope, we need to have hope. And this sounds like it sounds weird, right? Because it sounds like, oh, it's empty, right? And when people have these conversations about like, oh, are you a pessimist? Are you an optimist? And I'm like, at the end of the day, we need to actively choose to have hope. Like it's an active choice. And it's sometimes, and people just tend to think it's like, it's very easy, or like, oh, you're being very naive. And it's like, no, to me, if you're being honest about hope is really, really, really fucking hard. Because I agree with you. I look out at the world, and there are times where I like have real breakdowns and feel real defeat, and feel like, oh man, like, you know, climate change is getting worse, and there's genocides happening, and the government's getting more authoritarian and fascist. Like everything feels like it's just not going in a good direction. And that is really, really hard. And it's very easy to get into that doomeristic cycle of like, this is just how it's going to be. And the only way it is going to get better is if we choose to fight for it. And to choose to fight for it means you have to choose to have hope in something. And this is the thing that I always like try to, I think it's another theme that I talk about, and I've been talking about a lot in my videos, is like, a lot of the time nowadays, people seem to be fighting against something. Like here in America, we have Trump is like this easy figurehead of like, oh, we all fucking hate Trump. And I'm sure in Brazil, very much hate him as well for very obvious reasons. But it's like, he's a figure that's very easy to be like, all right, fuck Trump, right? And understandably so, fuck him. But if you're just fighting against him, all you're end up going to be doing is just reproducing a lot of the same norms that have led us to him in the first place, right? And this goes back to that idea of like articulating better futures and different futures, and like rehearsing queer futurity. Is like, yes, you can be against awful things, and you should be against awful things. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. We should fight Trump. We should fight fascism. We should fight all of these things. But if you're just fighting it and that's all you have, you're just going to end up at the end of the day, maybe you'll defeat them, but you'll not have fundamentally replaced that with anything new, anything better. And we'll just end up back here again. As Star Wars says, somehow Palpatine, somehow fascism returns, right? And we always go like, oh, how do we get back here? It's like, well, because we're not changing the world. We're just defeating fascism and then looping it back to the same thing that caused fascism in the first place. And so when I say to choose hope, what I'm saying is like, choose to fight for something. Fight for something different. Fight for something better. Fight for something that is a change to the status quo, that fights for a more inclusive future. And I think like when you start to understand that, I think that makes hope like a less like naive choice and a very much more active choice, and one that's difficult because you have to learn what you're articulating and fighting for. And like the thing that I have, you know, I my political views are very anarchistic, and a lot here in America, anarchism has been very vilified as like, you just want chaos in the streets and everything everywhere and da-da-da. I'm like, no, for me, what anarchism fundamentally means is building up community and focusing on the people around you and focusing on getting people what they need and understanding people and facilitating that in a way that like enables everyone to have their own voice rather than feeling like they are being dictated to or being people having control over us. Like to me, anarchism is about like it's fighting for power to do things, not power over people, and fighting for power to no unjustified hierarchies. And so that's a very nebulous thing. But what I think it ultimately means is like focusing on your community, focusing on people around you, focusing on going out and helping people get what they need, and helping facilitate people getting to be able to live their best life around you, and doing it in spite of a lot of these oppressive structures, whether it be capitalism, whether it be fascism, whether it be just the state in general trying to like take resources away from people or not providing resources. Like that's what I ended up fighting for. This is without getting too down that track, but like that's my hope that I choose to fight for. That's the kind of world that I choose to fight for. And that's an active choice that I have to make as a hopeful person. But it is one that is sometimes difficult because you're just like, it's going to be a lot of work, especially in the face of a lot of other things. So I don't know. I'm kind of, welcome to my TED Talk. Again, this is where I get in my own head again about like, man, am I just saying bullshit at this point? But but hopefully it makes sense. So
it made a lot of sense. And actually, like when you were talking, I remembered that actually I wanted to show you because I know that you're a fan as well. And when you were talking, I thought about it a lot. That it's my favorite author.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I said it, you were gonna pull down Le Guin. I adore Le Guin so much.
I have a bunch of stuff because she's my favorite author, and I know that
she really is.
You love her as well. So when you were talking, I kind of, it made me think about it. I have goosebumps because I really love her a lot. Anyway,
Le Guin, she's like my role model, right? Yeah. For so many things. Like she's so good at articulating a lot of these same things that we're talking about today. Like, yeah, she's just a beautiful author.
Yeah, I think she's the one that taught me like what science fiction could do, and she's very important to me as that. And well, getting back to it, I wanted to ask you something because it seems to me that many nerds, like pop culture fans, sometimes they choose to ignore this political debate between the media and all the discussions, and they kind of like feel comfortable being a fan of a certain magical school stuff, and they don't really like they ignore the consequences of that, all because escapism or nostalgia and stuff like that. And I wanted to know your take on it, specifically on your opinion. What's the role of the pop culture fan that wishes to change stuff in a world that is all the time disputing the meaning of the medias that pop culture produces?
Yeah. Oh man, God, that's such a big topic. But like, I mean, again, it goes back to that conversation we had earlier about like how pop culture is seen as product. Like in Hollywood, especially, like you see a lot of like art is seen as product, as just thing to sell to people. And it's meant to be frivolous, right? Like they want people to invest in it so they could sell more toys or sell more like merchandise. But at the end of the day, they don't view as art as like this thing that can inspire. It's just meant to be product, goes in, goes out, right? And when people choose to argue for something being apolitical, like, oh, why do you have to add politics into Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever? Whenever they argue that point, usually what they mean is they don't want to see differing perspectives than what they are comfortable with. And what they are comfortable with usually is just the norm of our society, right? Which is usually very white, cis, het dudes. Not always, like, again, usually rich, cis, het, white dudes. But like that sort of norm. And they get uncomfortable with like even just the visual presence of a queer person or a black person or a woman or any, variations thereupon in a thing. And that's what they rail against. And when they rely on like nostalgia, they are often relying on like a view of the thing that they have not critically analyzed, nor that they want to critically analyze. Because going back and looking at like if they're a fan of Star Wars, they forget like Star Wars at the time, in a very pop culture way, was like talking about the Vietnam War. But they don't see that. They just see this thing that they were like ignorant of as a kid and just wanted to like just escape back into. And I always say like nostalgia is not necessarily a bad thing, nor is escapism a bad thing. Like, you know, when I'm having a hard time, I retreat into Star Trek sometimes. You know, I need to like have a moment of like, oh man, I'm depressed or having struggles right now. I just need to watch a fun episode of Star Trek or just like retreat into this thing I love. And I think that that's important. It reminds us of like who we are, what we care about, and like gives us comfort. And I think that that's a very important thing. It's not a bad thing, but it's when you only seek that, when you only seek to be comfortable. And I think we need to push people to be more uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is not a bad thing. It is a thing that like makes people like understand other people. Like you should be uncomfortable when like learning about someone else. You should feel like you're like being pushed out and like having to learn about someone new. And I think that's exciting. I think that's cool. And it also, these people who like fight for comfort, they usually are people that have never had to be uncomfortable their entire lives. Like queer people, people of color, women, you know, like we all live with some level of discomfort. But we've like had to learn to just accept being uncomfortable and like acquiesce to people who we are always told to think about their comfort. And when we sort of articulate our own needs, we're talking about how we want to have people see us and fight for like making us feel a little bit more comfortable in this world. And that's really kind of like what we're fighting for. And I think that's what a lot of art is about doing, again, too, going back to what we were just discussing, is like trying to articulate our perspectives and our worldview. And, you know, again, when we talk about apolitics, like when people who argue like something to be apolitical, right now we're in a lot of ways with like mainstream art, like pulling back and trying to reassert like white supremacy and like male dominance. And so you're seeing stuff like, you know, a lot of these companies like pulling back on like, you know, having queer people in things. But even in the era where like just a few years ago, where you'd see more like queer people in things or women in things or people of color in things, often this is something that I would often talk about with people, is that like, even in like a lot of like Hollywood media, it would be very tokenistic, as we were talking about earlier, which is like, we'll have a woman here, but we won't really talk about that woman's perspective on something, like what her view of something as a woman would be. It would just be, we'll have a queer person here, we'll have a woman here, we'll have a person of color here, without really engaging with their point of view. And it'll just be saying like, oh, we can just swap people out and it won't change anything. Like, I think like Star Wars is kind of the example of this with like, I like Rey Skywalker as a character, but like, she's just like, oh, we'll just put a woman into the Luke Skywalker role. And it's like, what does Rey being a woman really change about that story? Because I feel like it would change a lot of things if we were going to be honest about it. But really, it's just like, oh, we're just going to put her in the role and she'll be the same type of lead character that Luke was. And it's just a nostalgic regurgitation of things that came before without engaging with like a unique perspective. And that's why it like those, again, I have some love for the sequels. I'm not hating them completely, but like, that's why they're a lesser version of the original trilogy in a lot of ways, because they're not engaging with new perspectives or new ideas. And so that's why when I talk about like, you know, again, my view on infinite diversity and infinite combinations from Star Trek, it's why, and queer futurity and all of these things, I'm like, the future is the future that I see. There is no one truth. There are multiple truths. Like the world, being human is multiplicative. Like there's so many different ways of seeing the world. And that's the beautiful thing about being human, is that we're all human and yet we're all different. And we all learn about the universe through coming to understand other people and other things. That's what curiosity is. It's what exploring is. You know, I learn about you and I learn about who you are, and that somehow teaches me a little bit more about myself. And by learning about your different experience, I can relate and understand who I would be in the situation that you're in. I think that that's a really cool thing to understand, just how varied human beings can be. And I think a lot of things like fascism or control, or people who say like things they want to be like apolitical, is like tending to try and say like humanity should exist one way. We should be homogenous. We should all like have 2.5 kids, you know, have, you know, a husband, wife, and like all exist that way. and no, or like maybe we'll allow subtle variations, but it all is about that kind of life. And it's like, no, life should be varied and different. And I think that that's, again, going back to like art, and why we articulate art is just a way to come understand other people's stories, understand other people, empathize with other people, empathize with how we want to create a different world, how people view the world. And people who say they want things to be apolitical just want things to be comfortable, to be homogenous, to just make themselves the hero of the story and justify the way that they live their life or seek to live their life, rather than asking them to see that life can be many different things, and not even judging their life, but saying other lives are just as valid.
What media do you think that was more distorted or stripped of its political meaning by the fans? Star Wars or The Matrix?
I mean, I feel like Star Wars is probably the one. I mean, The Matrix, like, it depends on how you want to engage with it. Like, The Matrix, I feel like there's not a bad like Matrix movie. This is the hot take, I know, but I love all the Matrix movies, and I think every Matrix movie has something really unique to say. People may misunderstand some of those things, but I think every single one has something unique to say. Whereas Star Wars, there's been some great Star Wars. Like, I love Star Wars Andor; it's phenomenal. I am also a defender of Star Wars: The Acolyte. I have many issues with that show, in terms of how, like, I have criticisms. But like at the end of the day, I think it's probably one of the more interesting Star Wars shows because of the perspective it's trying to place into Star Wars. And I think that, again, not saying good or bad, it is. Yeah, I think it could have done some of the things better, but I ultimately think that show is one of the more interesting ones. But then you get things like, and I even think there's some, I would argue there's some good things about the show, but like you get Book of Boba Fett or whatever, where it's like cameo from like this character. It's like a bunch of action figures. Like, look, we're gonna have the the Rancor fighting, fighting like we're playing with an action figure. And it's like, you're not saying anything really. You're just playing with action figures. And I think like that's a lot of like what some Star Wars has become. I will even argue, see, this is me being not all things are bad. Boba Fett even has some cool things to say about like how we treat indigenous folks, like with the Tusken Raiders and everything. I think there's some cool stuff there. But regardless, like a lot of Star Wars in what it's being, what it's doing has just been made into like, let's fight with action figures rather than say anything. I think Star Wars: The Last Jedi, or The Last Skywalker. Sorry, not The Last Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker. Excuse me. Rise of Skywalker is probably the example of just let's play with the action figures and not say anything new. But at the end of the day, like, if you're talking about like how fans engaged with it, yeah, there's a lot of people that have misunderstood The Matrix. I mean, I think like the best example that I usually discuss is Andrew Tate. Is probably the best, where he's just like, yeah, I'm Morpheus and you need to, like, you're living in the Matrix, so you gotta, and his argument is like, he's saying escape the Matrix, but what he's basically doing is like win the Matrix, like be the best like one in the Matrix you can. It's like, you're not arguing for people to escape the system of like masculinity and capitalism and exploitation. You're just saying become the richest person. So like, I feel like perhaps the Matrix is probably the most misunderstood, like perhaps has been taken as a tool of people who have misunderstood it more, like Andrew Tate, or like people like the fascists who use like the red pill metaphor. It's kind of died down a little bit on years, but it's still around. So like, I feel like it's been applied more to darker ends, The Matrix has. But Star Wars, I think, as like the art itself has been commodified more. That being said, Warner Brothers, I think, is making another Matrix movie. And I'm very nervous about that one. We'll see how that's gonna go.
I didn't know that. I'm scared.
Yeah. I forget who's writing it, but I remember hearing the writer. I'm like,
It's not the Wachowski sisters anymore?
No, it's not. It's gonna be someone else. So I'm like, yeah, I'm
a bit sad.
I have a very bad feeling about that. Yeah.
Well, as we're going to just a second. As we're going towards the end of the interview, I don't want to bring it down, but I think it's something important that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware, you probably are, but Brazil is the country that kills the most trans people in the world. And if it's not asking too much, I would like, if you can, to maybe send a message to trans folk in Brazil. I'm sure there a lot of people can be inspired both by your success, but by your failures and your experiences. And I don't know if you can talk to them and send them a message.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that I think I can say, because I know there's so many people dealing with many different things, is I just want people to know, especially trans people, to know like who you are is real. I feel like a lot of our culture tries to tell people that like what you are as a trans person is not real, or you're mistaken, or you're getting it wrong, or you're deluded, or you're narcissistic, or whatever terms that they have to try to make it seem like who you are is somehow wrong or diluted or different. And I just want to tell every trans person, but especially people in Brazil, like you are 100% valid in who you are. And I think it is a really beautiful thing to fight for people to see you and fight for you to get to exist in the way that you want to exist. And I want you to know that you are not alone in that fight, and you are not alone in being seen. And I know it's sometimes hard, and it sometimes can come across as trite to say like, oh, you're not alone in your scene. Because I think a lot of us, especially when we're isolated from community, feel like no one sees us. We're not valued. We're not valued as people, and no one loves who we are. And it's, you know, it can sometimes just feel trite when someone on the internet just says like, hey, you're loved and valid, whatever you are. Like it can come across as very just like, yeah. But I want to be very earnest. Like, understand, I know many of you may feel isolated or lonely, but there are 100% people out there who will value you, who will see you, who will see who you are and who you are striving to be, and who you are, you know, what you are fighting to become in whatever way that makes sense, whether it be through gender or whatever you're aspiring to do in terms of your job or whatever. Like, just know that like people will value you, will value that journey, and will be around to want to support you on that journey. And what hurts me the most is knowing that some people are isolated from that for numerous reasons, whether it be culture, geography, where they live, the people around them. But do know, like, please, even if you are isolated from those things, those people are out there. They will value you. They will love you. I am one of those people. Like, please know to keep fighting no matter what, because there are people that will value and want to link up with you and fight for you and alongside you and with you. So just, yeah, I think that's probably the best that I can say as just like a person on the internet. But just know that that is true. And I know it sometimes doesn't feel like it's true. Sometimes I struggle with that even. But know that it is. So.
Well, thank you for so much for saying that. And I agree with you 100%. And I just really hope that the space that I'm creating, it's open for people to reach out and talk to me whenever they need. And if people that are listening when this comes out feel insecure about sending me a message or something, don't be. I always answer everything, and I love talking to people that follow my work. So if that's the case with you, even if you're just, I don't know, have time on your hands and want to talk with me, feel free to do it. I'm always here. So just
that's the same thing I say too. I say this too, as I'm in a position now where I don't have, sadly, the energy or time to respond to everyone, just because I do get a lot of like emails and stuff. But I will always tell people, like, I do read every email. I try to respond to what I can, but if people send me a message, I do always read it. So always feel free to read it and know that someone's read it. And I try to respond when and if I can. But you always will be read. So yeah.
And that's important. Anyway, people reach out. We're here. So we just have one thing that I like to do with people by the end. We have a lightning round with some questions. You don't have to justify them if you don't want to, but if you want, you can. And just so we can get your profile, know where you stand on stuff. It's important stuff. We judge people by
very important.
Serious judgment. So let's go. First of all, an author, dead or alive, that you would like to have a coffee or a beer with.
I mean, we already answered that one. Ursula K. Le Guin. I would chat with her all day. I feel like I don't even want I would just like a tea. Yeah. A nice tea. Should be great.
I kind of knew you were going to answer that. A fictional character that you would like to do the same.
Ooh. this is going to feel. I feel like Spock. I don't know. I feel like that's an easy answer for me, and I could probably pick more obscure ones. But I feel like Spock is just a cool character to sit down with. Like he'd be smart. You could always drill him like to learn more things about science or technology, and they could be like, "But now tell me about you. I want to learn about you. You're fascinating." You'd be like, "No, I'm too logical." I'm like, "No, let's drill in deep. I want to know. I want to get through. I want to get through the barrier, man." So I feel like he'd just be an interesting chat.
I would watch an interview of you and Spock. Yeah, if you could interview him, I think it would be a fun time.
Yes.
Well, DC or Marvel?
DC.
Lord of the Rings or Narnia?
Ooh, Lord of the Rings, also easy, yeah.
Star Trek or Doctor Who?
Star Trek. So I love Doctor Who, but Star Trek's right.
I kind of knew that.
Yeah.
Star Wars or Dune?
Ooh. Oddly harder than I would think. I'm gonna be a basic bitch and say Star Wars.
It's fine. Star Wars sometimes let us down, but I kind of love Star Wars.
It's a complicated relationship.
Yeah.
Like Dune I think is like pound for pound probably qualitatively much better than Star Wars, but like come on, Star Wars is our sloppy, messy relationship that we just, we're in.
And that's the only hard part, to be honest, because I do love Star Wars, but it kind of lets me down sometimes.
Yeah.
And Dune, it's pretty good consistently, but like the movies and the book, I read 3 of them and I love them. So, well, what can I say?
Yeah. Unless we get into the Brian Herbert stuff, and then it can get messy.
They're releasing it for the first time in Brazil now, and I'm not gonna touch that shit. I can't.
I mean, again, it is one of those ones where it's like, there are better books to spend your time on. But if you are interested, it is just one of those like, wow, this is messy. Again, I will always take an interesting mess over a boring, like perfectly executed thing. And Brian Herbert is like, wow, you are messy.
Yeah, I don't have the time for it.
I know. Spend your time on better things.
Yeah. Well, Alien or Predator?
Ooh, I have to say Alien. I love Alien.
Blade Runner or The Terminator?
Blade Runner.
Jessie, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I already told you this a bunch of times, but I just really want you to know how much this means to me. Like, I'm not going to talk a lot because I'm going to cry if I start talking a lot. And you have a big impact in my life. And I'm sure, 100% sure, that a bunch of other people feel the same way about you. Your work inspired me. And even if it's not about this that I do, the Mutante Literário, it just as company, as someone that I can hear and feel what you're feeling. And that's been like huge for me. I stay a lot of time inside my house now because I can't get out. And having your videos, it's been like, I couldn't do it without it. So thank you so much for all your work and for agreeing to be here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This is truly, like, I mean this has been really wonderful and a really great conversation. And you seem really, really wonderful. So like, thank you for having me. This has been great.
Well, so we can finish this like better than I could. I would like you if you can like send a message to Brazilian fans and people that follow you, maybe not only from Brazil, because this video probably a lot of different people gonna watch it. So the floor is yours.
I mean, all I'll just say is thank you everybody for all of you have given me. Thank you for staying nerdy. Like, please, everyone, stay super nerdy, be geeky. I love talking about this stuff, and we should be talking about this stuff. And it is the biggest joy in my life because, same with you. Like, I grew up, queer kid in a small kind of community, so I didn't have a lot of nerdy folks that I could talk with. Was bullied for loving Star Trek and stuff. So like, every chance that I get to talk with nerdy, cool, interesting people who are full of joy with the things they love makes me happy and feel seen in a way that the young me didn't get to experience. And it goes to exactly what we're talking about, right? Like getting the chance to make a better future through our interactions with each other. And yeah, that's what we're doing. So keep doing that. Stay nerdy, stay wonderful. And adore y'all.
Thank you so much, everyone, that listened to this time. I think it's an hour 30. The editing may be an hour 20, an hour 15. Thank you, and I hope you keep following.
Yeah.
Bye.